Hello everyone, and during the big summer reveal, it was confirmed that we're getting a rather interesting style of arcane journal. The one for the Tomb Kings, the War of Cetrus Fury, is going to include a army of infamy for Dwarven Slayers, that's something that many people have been asking for, and then the Border Princes. Now, this one's a pretty interesting one because the Border Princes are essentially what Dogs of War really are, and they are one of the key factions in the old world that's still not really represented just yet. We do have some rules for some Dogs of War units, and even then it's incredibly limited, like the Bone Grinder Giant and so on. So what could this mean for the future? I think that this will be the Dogs of War, essentially. The Border Princes being the alternative to an eventual Estalia and Talia list that we might see down the line. So let's talk about that. I'm kind of curious as how this could be implemented. It's important to note that the Border Princes are not Talia and Estalia, and it's not really a country in its own right. It's an area of land where many people who've been exiled from their other respective locations go up to set up kind of mini-kingdoms, and then those mini-kingdoms usually get destroyed fairly soon after. It's a cycle of just because there's a ruling family there doesn't mean that they're going to be there for a long time. So what happens in the Border Princes is you can see Imperials, you can see Bretonnians. In fact, we have an exile list for Bretonnia in the Arcane Journal for Bretonnia. This is something that really does pique my curiosity, as I imagine whatever they do here might be similar, but might not be the full-on Dogs of War that we're expecting. When you look at the old Dogs of War army, it's pretty clear. It's mostly just mercenaries. There were standing troops too, but those were taken from the mercenaries. And you could use Bretonnians, you could use Imperials. The idea was using models from other kits to create your own standing army. And I think that's what's going to happen here too. Once again, very similar to the original Dogs of War ideal. Whether or not new units appear, well, that's remained to be seen just now. So far through this Arcane Journal, what we do know is that there's going to be new mount options for the Tomb Kings, and I do imagine they might have to introduce one or two new units, whether that be in the form of new actual miniatures, which is, I think, what a lot of people do want, or the rather kit-bashy way that they've been going about it, which I like, but has also become kind of tedious, because in some cases it's literally like the Wood Elves, just paint them up in specific colors and that's it, which is kind of boring, I'm not going to lie. That being said, I could imagine them bringing back a fair amount of old school units like the pikemen, purveyed crossbowmen, and so on, just removing what would have been the named character in there. They did actually do this before with Malachi McCason when they brought back the Goblin Hewer, and that would incentivize people to buy purveyed crossbowmen, pikemen, and so on. Because if the Border Princes are going to be introduced, they might as well use them as some sort of Dogs of War unit and introduce a bunch of the old school regiments of renown so other factions can use them. So you could field an army with the Border Princes as your own thing, and also then just have them as mercenaries, misbehaving mercenaries with any of your other chosen factions. Financially, this does make a lot of sense because, one, these are very popular troops. Keep in mind that they are mostly metal. There are some plastic stuff. Well, mostly bits actually. But the idea here is you've got some new units to play around with, and two, I mean, it's the nostalgia bit. A lot of people are going to go, oh, this is my chance to get my Dogs of War units that I could never afford as a kid, or I missed out on because I thought Warhammer Fantasy was going to be around forever, or just in general, you're just new to the hobby and you want to pick these up. A lot of people have been joining the old world, which is really, really nice. Some of them from the Total War franchise, and yeah, they want to pick up armies that they've been hearing about in the lore through speculation or videos, books, whatever. In a perfect world, we'd see these kits retooled in plastic. You never know, considering that the scope has changed for the old world, but it's something that I could see them bringing in the metal because people will buy it. Right? It's the same thing as the Teutogen Guard and so on. People are buying them. It's becoming quite a problem for people to pick up sometimes because they go out very, very quickly. They're very popular. They're very, very popular. Thing is, a Dogs of War roster would not be quite large. This is from a speculation for Total War Warhammer, but it pretty much is what everyone's expecting. There's not a lot going there because we'd have maybe a mercenary lord, a mercenary wizard, then a captain, hireling wizard, the usual stuff. Some duelists, maybe removing quite a lot of stuff from this too. But knowing Games Workshop, replacing stuff just to pad them in with Empire State troops, or maybe even some Bretonnia men-at-arms. So just as an example, just removing the Halfling Bowmen, the Slayer Pirates, and also the Norskin Bearmen, but replacing them with Spearmen, Sword and Shield Men, and Halberdiers for basic stuff, bringing in some Bowmen from Bretonnia, and then maybe some crossbows from the Empire, maybe some handgunners also. You'd be incentivized to pick up Empire kits. You'd have some unique units that are wholly unique to you, the Pikemen, the Purvey's Crossbowmen, but then you'd have to start using kits from other factions just to kind of pad that out, which I'm not totally against if it's going to be like a merc army and a gateway to the rest. I know a lot of people are wanting an Estalia and Talian force, and I think that's entirely possible, but I think that's way later down the line, and there is actual reason to think that way too. But before we move on, we'd obviously have to look at stuff like the Galloper Gun. That's something that a lot of people would want. Some Mercenary Knights, the Birdmen if that's possible. Even then, I think that could just be waiting until a proper Talia list happens. I have some theories about Talia in the future, but it's more of the case of don't expect named characters. I don't expect any named characters. I don't expect any, like, absolutely massive heavy hitters. No Dragon Lord, no Giants of Albion. I could be wrong there. I could be wrong. One thing certain, no, like, units from the Legacy faction. So no Incy Wincy's Raiders, but we could end up seeing some Orc crossbowmen. Now, people are still going to be saying, well, the Border Princes are not the Dogs of War. The Dogs of War come from Talia and Estalia. And I would agree, but it's very likely that Games Workshop are planning something else for the future. One thing that they're trying to do is leave the door ajar. And this is why we ended up with a rather interesting map update that then got swiftly removed. We know why that was it. Mostly because it was a bit of a problem, let's just put it that way, without acknowledging it too much. Yet, it's clear that Games Workshop are looking at the future. Talia and Estalia are possible factions that they could actually do for the tabletop. Humans are much easier to produce than, say, for example, new monsters and stuff like that. And it does look right now, at least for the time being, a lot of the legacy factions are going to stay in Age of Sigmar. Talia and Estalia are two nations that have had a lot of curiosity from the fan base over the years, and we've had new lore for them as years have progressed, even after the death of Warhammer Fantasy. Like, for example, we know that there's bull riders in Estalia, and in Talia they seem to worship the gods of lore more than anything else. This has been stuff from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which has to be approved and sometimes directed by Games Workshop. It's something that we know since the Old World interviews. I did one with the lads from Cubicle 7, and they even said, yeah, no, the Beastmen need to be showing up more. Don't let them fall under the shadow. They need to be a proper threat, and so on. That's really good to see, because that means that there is a potential that the lore that we're seeing in Cubicle 7 stuff might be tying up with everything in the Old World. I've always imagined Estalia being kind of like Inquisitorial Spain with conquistadors and so on, so some heavy pistoliers, some red priests, all the usual stuff that you expect from the memes, you know, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. And then for Talia, I've always kind of imagined kind of steampunk Romans. We pretty much get that there, right? There is the Roman Empire, so there is a few Roman city-states and stuff, but we do know that they've got a lot of Da Vinci styling stuff because of the Birdman, the turtle tank that was never actually turned into a miniature, I think, or maybe just got casted as a tester and that's it, but we have seen art about it. It was very Da Vinci style, right? So imagine that, but then added into a bit of a Roman theme, and there you go. Stuff like that would be really, really cool. I think there's a lot of potential, and it's very interesting that they're just flat out going, yeah, this is Border Princes rather than Dogs of War. It could just be because that's what the plan is. New races sell. That's something that's very important to note, right? New factions sell. Cathay has done very, very well. My local stores have basically been emptied, which is wild, actually, because Old World wasn't really that popular down here. And it's stuff that we know sells. New miniatures sell. Eventually, they're going to be redoing models for like the Empire and so on. We've seen that with the Tomb Kings so far, but how many people are going to be buying those new models, right? Compared to a brand new faction. I think that's the idea that they have. Now, I don't imagine that these will come down anytime soon, but it's important to note that in the rulebook, in the actual main rulebook where all the races tend to be, Cafe is already released, there was a lore segment for the Southern Kingdoms, both Tilia and Estalia. And usually what's there is for the playable factions. So I could imagine, again, maybe that's something that they've got planned for the future. I mean, why else were all these cities named, the regions marked out? It looked very much like, hey, yeah, this is going to be playable. And it's something that I would love to see. Kislev is still likely going to come first. I imagine that the Kislev models are done, but they're waiting. I don't believe the rumors that people are saying that it's because of the war. Really, I don't think Games Workshop are looking at that with that regards, considering that a lot of the Kislevite stuff is actually Polish, not Russian. Because, yeah, Winged Hussars and so on. It's just a combination, but it's mostly Polish stuff. But let's not rant about Kislev, obviously now's not the time. This is what I think. This is just a theory I've had. I've been thinking about it all weekend. I've gone out, like, with my friends. We played a bit of Warhammer and so on, and then went out for a few drinks, and literally it's all I could think about. Literally all I could think about. Maybe this is going to be right, and we'll come back a few months down the line or a few years down the line and go, hey, you were right. Maybe I'm going to be wrong, but I feel like I'm kind of caught up with the trends from Games Workshop. Could just be pure hopium. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. Maybe you guys have some different theories. Yeah, let me know. It's always good to talk about. The more we talk about the old world, the better it is. The devs and stuff and GW people are looking at posts on Reddit and Facebook and stuff like that. It's important we keep talking about it to show that, yeah, we love this. Change can come. It's the same thing how Heresy recently had their bit of drama, let's just put it lightly, and yeah, they managed to get some stuff showcasing up to Legends, and the Legends stuff is playable. They're going to be supported at GW events. That's a big change. We can get some big changes too. But yeah, have a great day, guys. I'll see you all again very, very soon.